Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. I hope you are very well. Today we have an episode that I think a lot of people can relate to and hopefully is going to give you some pointers of what you can do instead. So we're talking about how to know when to stop, how to know when to rest, how do you break patterns of exerting yourself to burnout, how do we stop the cycle of that happening. This has come from me having a number of conversations since the start of the year, currently recording this in 2024, where people are really experiencing this and have recognized in themselves that they have this pattern that they continue to kind of play out in their heads. Well, not in their heads, they're doing it day to day in their behavior, but they've recognized in their head, like, oh, we're doing this all the time. So just off the bat, whenever we talk about burnout, I like to kind of put a disclaimer out there and say, I am not necessarily talking about clinical grade burnout. Not that there has to be specifics around what it should or shouldn't be, but I just like to make it really clear that if you are experiencing really severe burnout, that is a medical issue and needs medical attention, and you need to make sure that you are actually on a plan to recover from your burnout. So this episode is not for you. This episode is not for people who are clinically in a horrific state of burnout, because that needs to be treated with a very sort of professional level of solution. It's a different situation, and I just say that because I hear so many people talking about burnout when actually they're not qualified to do so and shouldn't be, given the how complex burnout is, because it has a lot of complexities within it. That being disclaimer out of the way, many people will use the word burnout to describe a feeling that they get to in their business, in their life. Some people that is every year, some people it's multiple times a year, some people it's very, not often, but burnout is a word that is being used more and more, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think it's important to differentiate between the two. So when we're talking about burnout today, we're talking about this concept of people feeling exhausted, people feeling probably like they've lost a bit of spark in what they do, they're feeling really run down, they're feeling like, ugh, and everything just feels really heavy and overwhelming. The issue that we're going to discuss is around not knowing when to stop, because some people start to notice that they are actually creating the burnout in themselves by not knowing when to stop, because they get so excited or things like move in the business and they want to kind of keep going, and then they do too much. And that's what the episode is about today. So off the bat, what can you do about this? There are a number of different things. We have to understand, why is it that you don't want to stop when you have kind of already done enough? Now, this is the other problem. One of the biggest reasons that this happened is because people do not know when they've done enough. They do not know when they can stop. They do not know when they should keep going. And so it inevitably puts them in a cycle where they're just constantly exerting themselves to exhaustion. So what I want to suggest to you is that understanding goal attainment is really important in this. So understanding, what are you trying to do, where are you trying to go, in what time frame. That is where you will start to be able to categorize, especially if you're someone, often people who suffer from this are someone who really likes goals and they really understand, like, they want the high achievers and they want to achieve a lot. And so they really struggle with this idea of, well, we've got these big goals and we've got to keep going towards them. Whereas in actual fact, they will get a higher goal attainment rate over a year if they actually break their goals down into quarterly goals, and then they break them down into monthly goals and daily, weekly, etc., etc. And so at the end of a week or end of a day, they understand, we've done enough to hit that goal because we're on track and we're going to keep going and we will get there. And I really want to encourage you. That's why programs like Year of Clarity are so fantastic, but also other things that will help you plan and help you understand, where is a project at, or how much do you need to give to something. That is when those come into its own, because it's really about helping you shift your mindset of how you view tasks and to-do lists into more like projects or goals that you're working towards in the business. And then how do we make sure that they are allocated appropriately within the time you have. Often this idea of not knowing when to stop and burnout comes when people don't actually know how much time they have anyway. So a lot of people who come to me with this will not actually understand, what time do they have available. If you are a busy person, you have other responsibilities in your life, whether that's children, whether that's care responsibilities, whether that's sports, whether that's various different things in your life, family. You need to understand how much time have you got to allocate and do you want to allocate to your business? And that's a valid question. It's a valid question and it's a one that will change. So don't beat yourself up if it used to be 40 hours a week, but now it's 5. Or, it's now 50, but it used to be 10. Like, it is what it is. I wouldn't get yourself too hung up on that bit. It's just, what exactly have you got to give to your business right now? And your goals and your projects and your to dos will therefore change and tweak depending on what that figure is. But you need to understand what that figure is in order to have any chance of making sure that you don't actually sort of send yourself into burnout. The other thing you need to understand is, what contingency planning time have you got in place? Have you got planning time? Have you got contingency time where things take way longer than you thought? That needs to be incorporated into your weekly amount that you have, or monthly amount, depending on how you plan, in your business. You cannot account for every single hour in your business and expect that that's going to happen, because that will lead you to burnout. If you account for every single hour in your business that you are available to work and align a task with it, you will not achieve them all. It's so difficult to do that. So don't set yourself up for failure. And it's really important that you get more realistic on the time you have available. And this is where, when people do this, they then start to realize why they haven't achieved many of the kind of previous goals they've set in previous years, because they realize they just haven't had the time. And that's 100% okay. That's where a team comes into it, right? People say, like, well, how are people managing to do X, Y, and Z thing in such a short space of time? It's like, well, how many hours have they got as a collective? How many team hours have they got to deploy into different projects? Because yes, efficiency is important, and yes, planning's important, and all of this stuff, but ultimately it does come down to how many raw hours have you got of manpower or of AI, or how many hours have you got of somebody or something doing things. And if you are trying to achieve something that requires 100 hours a week of output, but you're a team of 1 and you've got 10 hours a week to give, then it makes sense as to why you need to tweak things. And it's not me saying that you can't achieve the goal. It's about me saying you have to tweak how you're going to get there. You tweak the strategies you use. You tweak what the expectation is. Like, there is a whole process that you will go through to shift towards what it is that you're actually looking to achieve. The other thing we need to really think about when we look at this is, what are you doing that is just a repetitive pattern that you've played out for years and years and years as a behavior? Maybe it's that when you were employed, maybe it's now you're not employed by someone, but you've actually taken with you a whole load of kind of morals and thoughts and rights and wrongs from that experience. And that can really damage people's entrepreneurial experience, because they essentially move from having a job to then employing themselves in their own business, having a job in itself, and that doesn't work for them. And they almost replicate what they had before, even though that wasn't what they wanted in the first place. So really understanding in your head, what is it that you want from self-employment? And then what patterns are you bringing with you that don't align with what you're actually doing? Because some things from corporate or previous employment can be hugely useful. I definitely see trends of, like, if certain people have had certain jobs, they will bring certain skill sets or certain processes or systems and ways of doing things, and it will massively impact their business. Like, it can massively increase their growth rate. But there's also a whole host of other things that they can bring with them that really doesn't help. So it's not about starting afresh and never utilizing anything that you've done previous, because that would be silly. Like, it's about you understanding which is benefiting you, which fits the journey right now, and which don't. I want to get really clear with you on what can happen if you don't take this seriously. Like, if you've tuned into this episode and you're kind of got a niggle where you're like, I kind of need to listen to this episode because it's sort of me, I want you to really just understand with yourself how important it is to deal with this, because clinical burnout is horrific. Clinical burnout is absolutely horrendous and can take you years and years and years and years to recover from. And some people you speak to will argue that they've never recovered from it. Like, clinical burnout is horrific. This isn't something that we can just like laugh about and be like, oh yeah, like, you just do too much and it's so funny that we're all so busy. Like, that is not funny. And so I really need you to think clearly about this topic and be like, I have to make change. and have to make a change. Otherwise, this could have really serious damaging consequences to your health, right? This isn't just about your business and making some money. This is about your physical health, your mental health, your long-term health and well-being. The behavior that you are living out day to day is either contributing positively or contributing negatively to that. And I speak to people where they know themselves that they are digging themselves into a real hole in terms of they're doing everything that they know is the complete opposite of what they should be doing. So, for example, um, they won't go to the gym because if they don't go to the gym 4 times a week, they can get another extra 4 to 8 hours back in their business. Now, for some people, that might be all right. If you're doing a scaling plan and you need to do 10 months of that, then fine. I'd still argue there's ways for you to fit in that stuff. Like, stuff needs to be non-negotiables. But for most people, like, you can't be just ripping things out of your schedule and being like, well, I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to go to therapy, and I'm not going to look after myself, and I'm not going to go for a massage, I'm not going to do this, because, like, that's the stuff that's helping you. And the stuff that is helping you to be the person that you are and show up as the entrepreneur you are and be the leader that you are is as important as the work stuff. This took me years and years to figure out and to believe. Well, not figure, just to actually get on board with and be like, yeah, okay, they've got a point. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to prove people wrong. I wanted to be like, no, this is not true. Not everyone has to do that. I was wrong, right? This stuff matters so, so heavy. And so you have to merge the two together. You have to find a way of blending things together and for you to prioritize your life and your well-being and your happiness as well as your business. Because if you do not, you could get into a point where you can't run your business at all. You have to close your business, or you have to sell your business, or you just have to, your life can become so small. And talking from someone who has gone through that, not necessarily because of that, but from a medical perspective, I can tell you it is an awful, painful, uncomfortable, horrible, scary, horrific experience. You do not want to get to that point. And I urge you to look after yourself so that you don't, because there is no need for you to. You can build a successful, thriving business without burning yourself out, without driving yourself into the ground, without you feeling like, oh, and dreading the every day. So, moving on. I want to talk now about why you have this drive to keep going when things go well, because I think this is something people really struggle with, and it makes sense, right? So sometimes people will say to me, it's not that I'm overworking because it's a disaster and I've got to, because I've got to pay my bills. Often people, especially if you're ambitious, especially if you're a high achiever, and I really resonate with this, right? I'm never sat here in these episodes as if I'm some sort of like angel and brought from heaven to deliver this message. Like, this is a real message for a lot of us, right? We're all working through this stuff. When you have a drive to make business happen, and I would argue in order for a business to really succeed, if you want to really grow it, you've got to be obsessed with your business. Even if you don't want to grow, actually, in order for it to generate profit, you kind of got to be obsessed. You kind of got to love it. You kind of got to be really into it, right? But what that does mean is that for some people, you will have this drive to keep going, like when things are going well, and you want to just keep going for more and more and more, and you're like, I can't stop, and I want to just keep going. It's like, right, I'll just keep doing this extra bit and I'll do this, and instead of clocking off 2 hours earlier because you can and you can enjoy your self-employed life, you'll do that extra 2 or 3 hours because you think it's really going to help the business move forward. That is where we have a real issue, and that is where we have to really sort it out, because this goes way further than just like your thought process. This goes into stuff where you need to look at, potentially through therapy, through kind of practice, for you to look at your life as a whole. Because what often it means is, and I will list off some of them, if you are in a position where you're like, things are going really well, and actually you could finish, maybe you could take the Friday off, or maybe you could finish on like Friday lunchtime and have an extra, Friday afternoon off work. But instead you're like, no, I'm going to sit here and do X, Y, and Z thing. That often is coming from either or insecurity, worry, money mindset, lack of belief, lack of long-term goals, unclear plans, rocky vision, previous history of kind of boom and bust and having lots and then having nothing. And all of those things, they can be one thing or often it's a combination of those things, that can end up being exhausting for you mentally, let alone what it actually means, the physical toll it takes on your body. You cannot use business as a way for you to just process through those emotions because you're not actually processing them. You're just adding on to them. You're just stacking them. You're just providing more evidence to them. And you're suppressing the feeling. It might be that you're suppressing the emotion, but the actual thing is still there. And again, I'm not going to go into like, there's a whole thing we could go into with that, but that is something that for you to go and work on if you identify with that. Because the insecurity piece is a one that, I would argue most of us have, right? We all have insecurities about certain things for certain reasons. None of us are perfect. But there are some people where this can really take over their business and their life and how they're able to show up because they're so insecure that everything's just going to leave tomorrow and everything's going to go and it's going to like burn to the ground. I see this a lot. People can have amazing years. They might have a record breaking year. They've doubled their revenue and they think it's a fluke. It's not going to happen again. Oh, this only happened because of X, Y, and Z thing, or this happened because this happened in the market. And they find external validation of reasons as to why something happened when actually it wasn't necessarily that. And often that's really difficult to measure and you can never really fully know. But people will find evidence to support the insecurity further and to kind of maximize it even more. What we need to be doing is finding other ways to look at that insecurity, breaking down why is that there? Where did that come from? Again, that's not in my remit to start doing, but it's something you can go and do with a professional for you to think about, why do I worry so much? What am I worried about? If you've made it happen before, why can't you make it happen again? There are various processes of sort of questioning that you can go through to really encourage yourself to challenge what you believe, to challenge what you know to be true. Because actually, if you on Friday afternoon took that afternoon off, or on Thursday night thought, actually, I'm going to have Friday off. I've done my goals for the week. I've done the stuff I need to do. Yes, I have a whole load of stuff next week, but next week is next week, and I'll deal with next week when we get there. For now, I'm going to enjoy this moment that I'm in, and I'm going to reward myself for an amazing week that I've had. And you go off and have a fabulous Friday. And you have a lovely weekend, and you come back on Monday. I would argue that like 9 times out of 10, if not more, you will be way more productive that next week and get way more done if you take that Friday off than you will if you just say, oh no, I'm just going to keep working and working and working and working. There's a difference there, okay? People talk about working smarter, not harder. One of the things I believe that is actually really useful in that is this sort of stuff. Is understanding it's not about time, it's about energy, it's about intensity, it's about result. Time is just a social construct. The amount of time you are spending on something is irrelevant for most of the time. That is not important. What is important is how you approach your work and how much you can get done and the quality in what you do. And so realigning that in your head is really important. Now, the other practical point from this that I want to touch on is that in order for this to be a long-term shift of you being able to say, I am going to stop because I've done enough, and breaking those patterns and actually resting and enjoying the life that you're building and enjoying the journey that you're on of entrepreneurship, is that you need to set a schedule that actually works for your life and most importantly works for your energy levels. So doing an energy audit and understanding like, where does your energy lie? Where does it feel good? Where does it not? Where are you lacking energy? Where do you have loads of energy? Like understanding what days, of the week, of the month, when do you feel more excited to do certain aspects within your business? Instead of fighting against that, lean into that and build a schedule that works for you. And again, this is where all of the previous issues come up around like insecurity and worry and judgment and like what's social construct is right and what's wrong of like what should your schedule look like. Can you take a week off every month? Can you only work 2 or 3 days a week, like that's where you're going to come and you'll be faced with a lot of like, well, my parents have never done that, or that isn't allowed from where I've come from. But we've got to remember we're rewriting things, okay? Neuroplasticity exists for a reason. And it is the most exciting thing. It's so exciting when you read neuroplasticity. Like the more you read about it, you're more like, yes, thank goodness this exists. We need this in the world today. You can rewrite that message within yourself. And so I want to encourage you to create a schedule that actually will energize you rather than drains you, but it takes into account what energy you do have. Utilizing it when it's high, when you have that drive, like, I don't want to stop, I want to keep going. Finding a way to put that into your schedule so that it can be utilized. We're not saying suppress it and don't use it and that it's a bad thing, but it's about how do you balance that out. So if you're going to do a 12-hour day or a 14-hour day, how do you make sure that the next day or the day after is either a day off, or you are doing something that's really low in terms of like the mental type of energy you're using, or it's creative? Like, you figuring this out is so important. It's extremely personal to everybody. Yeah, everybody's experience of this is completely different, but I'd really urge you to test things, because like everything I say, you're not probably going to get it bang on straight away, and it will change as time goes on and as your life moves forward. But I'd really encourage you to think about how can you change up your schedule to help facilitate this idea of being able to stop. Where can you put things in place so that there's actually a physical roadblock where you're like, I've got to finish work because X, Y, and Z things happening. The other thing to think about here is you allowing yourself to have time off and not think about work. Do not do this, but then still spend, say, for example, that Friday we talked about. Say on this Thursday you decide, right, okay, we're going to take the Friday off. Do not, on that Friday, think about work all day whilst doing whatever you're doing. Don't feel guilty about not doing it, because otherwise you might as well have been working. You need full mental disconnection from work. Leave it at your desk or leave it at some kind of space in your head or physical space. Close the door and say, we're not picking that back up till Monday. Because it's that disconnection that will actually help you when we say that you'll be more productive next week. If you just churn on stuff all the time you're off and you're thinking, oh, I feel really guilty about this, I would argue, and I don't know from a scientific perspective whether this is true, but I would argue, and from what I've heard from other people, that that actually doesn't give you much benefit, because you end up just getting to your desk on the Monday feeling like you've not actually been away and feeling really guilty more than anything that you haven't done anything. Which is why, if you are, sometimes if I'm off and something is playing on my mind, I will actually happily do like an hour of work or 2 hours of work if I know that it's productivity, right? And if I know that actually that is helping me calm the brain, get the thing down on paper, do that, and then I can move on and disconnect. This disconnection piece has been something that I have worked on for the last few years. This was something I really struggled with about 3-4 years ago, definitely 4 years ago, but 3 years ago. The last year I really took on a big challenge of like every weekend taking 3 days, and like, was that going to work? And that really helped change things for me. And now I feel like I can totally disconnect all the time. But I really understand if you're in that position of feeling like, I just think about it all the time. Like, you're not alone. A lot of people do, but it is not healthy for you to for a prolonged period of time. Like, you can't for 10-15 years be operating like that, because you will burn out. I hope you take something from this episode today and you go and implement it into your life day to day. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Please send me a message if you have anything to say on it, or tag me in your content and share it. I'll leave a review. Please leave a review. I don't often ask for a review, but if you listen to the podcast a lot, I'd love if you left a review on whatever platform that you listen on. It helps other people find the podcast and discover it, and it's nice to hear that someone enjoys listening. Often the podcast can feel quite distant in the sense of if you don't always know who's listening or tuning in, but thank you, because I know a lot of you do that every week religiously, so thank you very much. Take care, and I will be back next week. Bye.